Hey, everybody, welcome into another episode of A Nichols Worth. I'm your host, Keaton Nichols. You can catch me on the socials at Keaton D. Nichols. Make sure you subscribe to our show page at A Nichols Worth on YouTube. It's our new one for this year, keeping everything, this season rather, keeping everything on YouTube. Check it out. You can get our live videos there. As well as a list of past shows. Every single one is going to be up there. And as always, we're still on Spotify and Anchor as well. Just search A Nichols Worth. Happy Wednesday to everybody out there. March the 17th, 2021. The big news of the past 24 hours has seemingly been, of course, the story of Robert Long, a 21-year-old in and around the Atlanta area shot and killed 8 people. There are others who are wounded as well. 6 of those victims were Asian American women, which has now sparked off this sort of national conversation about violence against Asian Americans. A very interesting reaction, but one that is expected in this particular case. Something horrific happened yesterday. And before we get too deep into the weeds about breaking down some of the things that we should be kind of pulling from this, we can't ever sort of dehumanize the situation when something like this happens. Oftentimes that's what we do. We look at the numbers and the scale of everything and we say, wow, this is the largest shooting that we've seen in Texas, or this is the most horrific shooting since 2014. And we kind of, do these numbers and kind of lose sight on the fact that, people lost their lives and something that absolutely didn't need to happen. So the United States, we'll get into this a little bit later, absolutely leads the world in terms of guns per capita and homicide deaths via gun. So gun homicides, let's call them, in the world. We're far ahead of just about every developed nation. There's maybe a few countries that are ahead of us on that, but still, being at the top of that list or near the top of that list is not something that you want. It creates an interesting sort of environment around guns in this country, and I've done some other shows and some other podcasts on that kind of thing. It's weird culture. It is a bit strange, but it is what it is here in this country. That's just what we've done with this. So I don't want to lose sight on that that people died yesterday in an incident that absolutely didn't need to happen, whether it was by gun or by something else. Absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, this incident has really put, the issue of violence or harassment of Asian Americans, sort of back on the center stage. And I say back because, sort of last year, very early on in the pandemic, we know that the prior administration sort of exacerbated, if you will, that issue of violence against Asian American people, which we'll get into again in just a second. But the reaction, I think, has been appropriate. There's been a lot of people that have kind of made the comment like, wow, look at all these people that suddenly understand what hate is and they understand how to react. Yes, of course, this is what's supposed to happen. And I think there are other situations in which people that look like me, for example, haven't exactly had that same respect given to them in certain situations. But I don't think that this is necessarily a stage where we should be, sort of competing for that attention, if you will. I think that the reactions have been fair. And I think that this is what we should be doing when something like this happens, not just having a national conversation, but sort of putting social pressure, if you will, on some folks. Everybody, people from the NBA, I know Jeremy Lin had commented on this. You have people in Congress, Asian Americans in Congress, or people of Asian descent in Congress, who have commented on this. So it's a lot, right? Like, it's a lot in the moment of what's happening right now. So just some information on this in case people weren't really aware as to how bad is violence against Asian Americans. This is from NBC News. I just found this today, and this information has been, sort of repeated in other outlets. I so happen to get it from NBC News, but you can find this information now just about anywhere. They said the research released by reporting forum Stop AAPI Hate on Tuesday revealed that nearly 3,800 incidents were reported over the course of roughly a year during the pandemic, significantly higher than last year. Women also made up for about 68% of those incidents, those reported incidents. So that's a lot in comparison even to last year. These numbers are continuing to sort of rise. And that's obviously a big issue. That's a problem when pockets of hate are then arising, and creating and sort of highlighting issues like this, or underscoring rather issues like this. So if you've been watching some of the political realm, even if you haven't, the Democrats have kind of, and I think rightfully so, been aiming some of this blame cannon for this recent uptick in violence, or this uptick in violence over the last year, on the prior presidential administration. We're talking about Donald Trump, right? And I think that makes sense, right? Given his rhetoric. Sorry about that. Given his rhetoric, and the virus. Jen Psaki, she's the White House press secretary. Much less exciting than any of the press secretaries that Trump had, because, she doesn't have to lie about really blatant and obvious facts that we all see in society. That was a tough position, I'm sure, for prior press secretaries to have. Jen Psaki, she's the new one for Biden. And she said at a presser today, I think there's no question that some of the damaging rhetoric that we saw during the prior administration, calling COVID the Wuhan virus or other things, led to perceptions of the Asian American community that are inaccurate, unfair, and has elevated threats against Asian Americans. And we're seeing that all around the country. We're seeing that around the country, rather. And she's right. Calling it the Wuhan virus, saying it's the Chinese virus, or any of the other names that he sort of put on it. And it's not just the names, right? It does go deeper than that. If you did take any of the time to listen to some of the press briefings during the course of coronavirus that Trump himself showed up at, or had one of his press secretaries, his unfortunate press secretaries have to sort of be the mouthpiece of what exactly Trump thought at one of these daily briefings, if you will, on coronavirus, a lot of blame was put on China. And a lot of the media here, China and Chinese people, I should say, by the way, and a lot of the media that was there would push back against this rhetoric. I don't want to give this impression that there weren't people who were stepping in and saying, hey, what you're saying right now is damaging, and what you're saying right now is wrong. There's a few specific examples of this, not just from Asian journalists either. So by the Democrats sort of aiming this, blame cannon at Trump, I think that's right. In terms of right or wrong, that's where you can point to this. But I think we have to remember also that, and I talk about this when we talk about Donald Trump and trying to understand exactly, what's happening with Donald Trump, why Donald Trump happened in this great country, quote unquote, this great country like the United States. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the people made this happen. Right. The people made this happen and tried to continue to make it happen for another 4 years, a valiant effort, just last November. And what I mean by that, a few things. First, the people elected Donald Trump. Now, I know he did not get the majority of the votes in this country. He lost the popular vote in 2016 and 2020, of course. But in the election that he actually did win, the people elected this man, right? It was a close race, and maybe it could have been decided by a few, tight factors. That's pretty much every presidential race, though, right? The people still elected him. There were enough votes that it even was close, and he won. And so when we say things like Trump exacerbated a negative rhetoric, or a harmful rhetoric against Asian Americans during the course of his presidency, the violence that we are now seeing across the country is not Donald Trump going around and individually harassing Asian Americans, on a U.S. tour or something. No, Donald Trump is where Donald Trump is. The people who are inflicting this damage on the Asian American community and other communities as well. But tonight we're talking about specifically about Asian American violence. The people the individuals who are perpetrating this violence are American citizens. These are people who live in America, who are oftentimes, yes, following the rhetoric of the president, and have been influenced by the rhetoric of the president. That's a problem. That's a major problem, because America loves to claim that it's this place of great diversity. Our diversity is our strength. You'll hear a lot of Democrats probably saying that in the next couple of years. Right? Our diversity is what brings us together, or, sort of things like that. And those are nice catchphrases. They really are. And they make you feel warm and fuzzy inside about being an American, but it's not exactly true. Are there individuals that do this? Yes. Are there pockets of the country in which you might experience this consistently? Yes. But I think what this shows, if one man, one single individual person can stand up in front of a crowd or in front of the nation and say, hey, I really think that we should throw some shade and throw some hate at the Asian American community, and then people actually do it, yeah, we should condemn the man for speaking out on it, which we have done. And I think we should continue to do that. Make sure that history kind of, and that's what I think the Democrats are kind of trying to do here, make sure history remembers exactly who is responsible for this uptick in violence. And hey, it's not us, right? Previous guy. And that was a real rhetoric that had a real effect. But let's not forget that the people of this country, the people of this country, almost half of the voting public, almost have voted twice to elect this man as president. One time he actually won, the other time he didn't, but voted twice for this man. After 4 years of this rhetoric, it's not surprise kind of stuff that came out of nowhere. People knew who he was, certainly by 2020. I think they knew who he was in 2016, but we can't forget that. The people were the ones that elected Trump. The people are the ones who are inflicting this violence on Asian Americans and others. We don't have this utopian diverse society in this country that we would love to believe that we do. And I'm not saying that to take a swipe at America because I hate America or I'm anti-American or anything. I think that we have to identify these problems so that we can get over them. Like if you don't acknowledge that something is wrong, then you don't fix the problem. And I think too often times we treat incidents like what happened yesterday. And who knows? He says it wasn't racially motivated, but who cares, right? Like we know that the demographic group of the people that he killed and shot and maimed, we know that the facts were all there. The evidence is all there. We can all make our own conclusions about whether or not it was racially motivated or not. The guy's a murderer. I think whether or not it was racially motivated or not is the least of his individual concerns. But I think at this point, we have to look at situations like this and we really have to think to ourselves, how can we solve this? This is not something that we can just say, oh, this is a one-off. This is an outlier on society. This was a radical that was influenced by a few crazy words. This is not America. This is not what makes up America. Well, at some point we have to acknowledge that, yes, this is a part of what makes up America. That's not something to be embarrassed about. That's not something to run away from. That's something to fix. You can't claim that you have a Bentley if you have a Ford Focus in your driveway. No matter how much you want that to be true, the fact is the fact. Whatever car you have in your driveway is the car that you have. You can believe that you have a Bentley. You can believe that you are rich. You can believe that all these things are true that they are that really aren't. Sure, you can believe that. But it'd be a lot harder to actually acquire a Bentley in that situation, a real Bentley, if you don't first acknowledge that you don't have one now, if that makes any sense. And that's what we've got to do in this country. We have to acknowledge that this awesome country that we would like to portray to other countries and would like to display as being the power and the pride of the world isn't really that great. Within that context, at least, it is not that great, but that's how we get to work on this. If we continually sort of uphold the pillars of this very problematic society, then the same type of leadership is going to be finding its way to this system. We don't want that. We've talked about it, within other shows as well. We don't want the same type of leadership. We don't want the same type of things to happen. So if we don't want the same type of things to happen, then we cannot continually promote the idea that what is happening right now is good and is okay. But it sometimes gets derailed for a second or two when tragedies like yesterday happened. It's real. It's absolutely real. And I think that we are getting better at identifying, as a country, we're getting better at identifying some of these issues. I think that's good. But identifying is just half the battle. Once we find out, once we do the data and the research, or we find the data and do the research behind this, I think a lot of us start to think to ourselves, okay, now I understand it, right? Now I'm getting more information about why this is happening. The next step is actually fixing it and solving it. Identifying or knowing that this information is a part of fixing the problem, yes, but it's a part of who we are too. So I think all communities, when people talk about like the issue of like, how do we stop, violence and hate against Asian Americans? It's real simple. Just don't do it. There's nothing that I can bribe somebody with and be like, hey man, I think that you treat Asian people like garbage. I think that you shouldn't. Like, there's no speech that you can give to a person that has hate in their heart. Really, I don't believe so. The biggest thing is just not doing it. Some of us in this country, especially those that belong to quote unquote minority groups, I think understand a little bit better the concept of diversity and fairness and equality a little bit better than, let's say whites in this country. I think there's a fundamental sort of thing, an experience type of thing that you just kind of got to have to understand it a little bit better. And oftentimes it is minority groups like the Asian American community that has come out in full force to bring awareness to this. It's oftentimes those minority groups that are sort of tasked unfairly with leading the conversation about how not to hate. I mean, there's certainly some hateful people who are people of color as well, but I mean, the main issue isn't really on this side of the line, so to speak. And that's something that, again, people have to understand and recognize that is a part of them. It's a flaw that is a part of them. People of all colors, really, and of all races. If you have hate in your heart, you just got to stop, man. Like, that's simple. There's no speech, there's no class, there's no desensitivity or sensitivity training or anything else like that that can prepare you for that. Just don't do it. And I think there's a lot of people that do understand that in this country, but there's a lot of there's too many people, I think, in this country that make up too large a percentage of this country that don't believe in that necessarily. They feel that their hate is justified. And people like Trump, when they get up to the front of the crowd and they incite and they say the things that he did, it doesn't create, it doesn't, it's not like Trump said what he said, and then suddenly people who were otherwise good and God-fearing people, so to speak, suddenly now believe that Asian Americans are at fault for this. Typically, if you were the kind of person that's willing to inflict damage on an Asian American because of what Trump said, it didn't necessarily take Trump saying that for that thought to originate or that thought to pop up in your head, and for you to then go further with that. So that's an issue that I think we need to address in this country. There are other sort of facets of this as well. Like, I don't want us to get too comfortable in this idea of, that the Biden administration, because it's going to be so much better at least handling and measuring these situations than the Trump administration. I don't want us to get lost in the idea that the Biden administration is going to be better, for these kinds of issues in the country. We got to look at what the numbers say. We got to, not just the numbers, we got to look at what the situation warrants itself over the next couple of years. Violence in this country is something that is done far too often, and it's oftentimes between communities that don't really understand each other. That's something that we got to work on. Hopefully the Democrats do better at that. But also, I think local politics are going to play an important role here. I think local politicians have become very distanced from their constituencies. And in that instance, it becomes hard to kind of solve problems like this on a local level. A lot of local politicians just looking to get to that next step and that next level without investing any real time in their community. So that's something that I'm looking for as we continually think about candidates that we want to craft for the 2022 elections before 2022 gets here, right? Crafting the idea of what kind of person we want. That's the kind of person that I want, right? Somebody that isn't going to look at this issue as a political thing, right? Like, oh, I'm going to stop violence in these particular communities because it's good for my political career. I'm going to do what I can to stop violence in these communities because it's what the community needs, right? That's the mark of a good politician, not one that rises through the ranks, one that has shiny teeth and can, smile and make a promise, right? It's the ones that actually get the stuff done. Those are the best representatives. So those are some of the things that I'm looking forward to. Let me know what you think in the comments section as well, to some solutions possibly to some of these issues, or what that we can do on a local level to kind of help as a community, and other conversations that might need to be started as well. You can leave those in the comment section if you so please. And I think that we do have to get creative with this kind of stuff. It is about incentives. It's about resources. It's about understanding mental health. A lot of this stuff to sort of quell violence in cities all around. But I also don't want us to get too stuck on this idea of, with this story yesterday about, sort of race, and did he do it because they were Asian, and what's the evidence of that? Is he going to be charged with a hate crime? These are a lot of sugar topics around this particular incident. 8 people are dead because of this person. And that's the real tragedy here. So hopefully we don't lose sight on that. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and I am going to get out of here. Make sure you like and subscribe. Of course, you can you can subscribe to A Nicholsworth at A Nicholsworth on YouTube, all that other good stuff. YouTube. We're on Spotify, we're on Anchor, Facebook, all different types of stuff. Make sure you check us out. Parkourtherapy.com sponsoring this month. So make sure you check them out. All new Parkour Plus workouts are all the rage. I actually just did my first workout today on Parkour Plus because I'm having trouble working out and I'm just not that kind of guy that's naturally motivated. But Parkour Plus workouts are pretty darn good. They're very easy. You can do all different types of stuff right from your phone. It's pretty cheap per month, and you get a free trial to start. So make sure you check that out. Parkour Plus, available now at parkourtherapy.com. I'm going to get out of here. I'll see you guys again on Friday for another edition of A Nicholsworth. Give this a share on your timelines if you care, and I'll see you on Friday.